Okay, now our next speaker is Mike Smith. He's the president and has been the president for quite some time of the Finger Lakes Railroad. And he will, for those of you that are not familiar with the Finger Lakes Railroad, he will provide a quick overview. The Finger Lakes, obviously, for those of you that are not in New York State, the Finger Lakes area is in the central New York State area. Typically, the Finger Lakes are lakes that are located between Rochester and Syracuse. And I will let Mike take over from there and explain what where the railroad is and what they plan on doing in the near future. So hello and welcome to Mike Smith.
The Finger Lakes has been in operation since 1995. We're principally a freight operation. We've grown our business quite a bit. We started out with about 5,500 carloads. We're now over 20,000. So we've had pretty good luck in terms of establishing a base freight business. And over the years, as a result of that, we wanted to branch out into some other areas, and the passenger excursion business was an obvious potential opportunity for us, given the location that we are in, the Finger Lakes themselves. And over the years, we've run a rather limited excursion business. We have some ex-Canadian National 1954 cars, which are our primary fleet. And we've added to that with a couple of heavyweight cars. Essentially, we run with a 3 to 4 car train. And we do that with contracted operations. In other words, we'll deal with the local Rotary Club. Today, for example, the Ducks Unlimited people have hired a train to cover what we call our Old Auburn Road. And it's that type of business that we've been promoting. And this year in particular, we hope to expand that type of business, as opposed to the regularly scheduled kind of excursion business that so many railroads are operating. This year, we also have added a bud car. And it currently is being broken in, if you will. And our idea there is that with a standard excursion train, we have an operation that is just way too expensive for some of the markets that are out there. And in particular, in the Finger Lakes region, one of the major markets is the bus tour market. And they're always looking for something additional to offer their riders. And the bud car fits very nicely into that particular market arena. And what we hope is that we are going to be able to, in the upcoming year, attract a lot more of the bus tour type of business to the Finger Lakes. I mean, the economics are kind of basic. One of our road locomotives, they start out at 3 gallons per mile. The bud cars basically are 3 miles per gallon. So the economics, especially these days with the price of diesel skyrocketing the way it has, the economics of a bud car operation make an awful lot of sense for us. And of course, it's not a new operation. A lot of tourist railroads use buds. And there are some commuter railroads that still are using bud cars out on the West Coast, for example. And the cars that we are using came off the Dallas area rapid transit operation between Dallas and Fort Worth. They were substantially rebuilt by Alstom up in Montreal. And we think that they are going to be a very attractive car for the kind of market that we're going out after in upstate New York, in the Finger Lakes region. Further use might be, we are talking to the New York State Fair people. They're always looking for ways to get people to the fair. And one of the markets that they would like to tap would be Auburn to the fairgrounds. And we are discussing with them the possibility of a shuttle. And the bud car, being bidirectional, is a perfect vehicle for that type of operation. So that's another area that we will be focusing in on this year. Gary had mentioned that he had heard a little bit about an operation that we are proposing up in Maine. And I just thought I'd bring that up very quickly. most of you are probably familiar with the Downeaster operation that runs between Boston through Portland to Brunswick, Maine. The folks at NEPRA, who are the operators of that Amtrak train, have had a long-term desire to extend that operation from Brunswick to Rockland. And we, as Finger Lakes, have been looking at taking over the operation of the Brunswick to Rockland line for freight operations. It turns out that with the Bud cars, we think that there is a opportunity to extend the Amtrak Downeaster service to Rockland with a Bud car operation between Rockland and Brunswick. And the motivation here, and the thing that has really moved this along, is the fact that with most opportunities, or what are viewed as opportunities, there's always an associated study. And what we have proposed, and what Maine DOT and NEPRA are very interested in, is for the cost of a study, we can actually set up an operation. And so when the study was preliminarily offered as an option to consider whether to go to Rockland, it's pretty much expanded to something in excess of $700,000, close to $800,000 in terms of a study. Well, you can run a train for that. And so what we and MDOT and NEPRA are looking at is basically an operation that would basically cost under what the study would cost. And we actually would have real results in terms of, is there a market there, or are we just hoping there's a market there? So we'll actually have a practical experience, we believe, in terms of that extension of a service. And so it's one of those things, we'll just see how it all works out. We need obviously NEPRA and Maine DOT to fully endorse this. And of course, the goal is to have a compatible service with Amtrak, a service that meets Amtrak's standards as far as seating, onboard service, restrooms, the various things that are important to Amtrak in terms of identifying what its service is and making sure that all of those who are associated with that service meet the Amtrak standards. So that pretty much summarizes things, Gary and Bruce, in terms of what we're doing in the Finger Lakes and our little extension into the inner city business, if you will, or at least proposed extension into the inner city business up in Maine.
Thanks, Mike, for joining us today. We really appreciate it. We haven't seen you and I haven't seen you in many years, but good to know things are going well. Good to hear good progress on the freight side for your operation.
Thank you.
Will the proposed or the additional service here in the Finger Lakes, I know you're saying it's not going to be regularly scheduled necessarily, but will it be open to the public, or is it going to be more marketed to, again, as you've mentioned, bus tours and such, which makes a lot of sense?
Well, the service is open to the public through the sponsoring agencies. For example, Ducks Unlimited. They will sell those particular tickets to the public for that particular excursion. The Rotary Club, for example, where we run a variety of trains throughout the year, Christmas time in particular, all of those tickets are open to the public, but have to be purchased through the Rotary Club in that particular case. So our excursions are open, but they are basically focused in on the sponsoring organization. And for the sponsoring organization, what's important is that so many of these organizations are using this as a fundraising device. For example, the Geneva Rotary Club, one of their major sources of income are the annual Santa Claus trains that we run for them. And so there's that added benefit for the localities in terms of we represent a good device for a lot of these groups to raise money for the various charities that they support.
There was some scuttlebutt this past week about potential excursions south out of the Geneva. Any truth to that?
There is. We've always looked at the Watkins Glen market as being a good potential for us. Our difficulty with that particular market is the fact that we inherited, even 25 years later, what we inherited was a really broken down railroad, and we've put a lot of money back into it, and finally it's starting to show up in terms of benefits on the freight side. We've had 2 continuous years now where we've exceeded 1,000 carloads outbound of salt from Watkins Glen. That's changed the economics on this branch significantly, and it's prompted us to put together a plan to get the line up to not only a minimal passenger standard, but get it up to basically a 30-mile-per-hour railroad, where we could offer, I think, a wide variety of excursion options for people that are visiting the Watkins Glen area. And we would probably, in that area, Bruce, operate a regularly scheduled tourism type of service.
Mm-hmm. There's a question about how many Bud cars you currently have. It sounds like, I believe you have one at the moment, but it sounds like you might be interested in more if there's potential.
Yes, we have one, and we have options on more. Obviously, we need at least 2 up in Maine, and our sense is that for a proper service, we'd probably need 3 up there. And if the car works out as well as we think it will on the Finger Lakes, we plan to add a second car as well, and we have options for those cars.
Mm-hmm. Great. Gary?
I guess my only question is I know several people had asked me over the last year or so with some of the excursion railroads, as far as just having more scheduled trains from Geneva to the to either to the east or to the west. But I guess what you're saying is most of that is done with organizations, and if people are interested in that, I didn't know whether there's some Rotary Club website or whether you put some of that stuff on your website, just so that people can, because we get a lot of people that are looking at the Adirondack Scenic in Utica, and then they're like, well, isn't there anything else? What about the Finger Lakes? And then they try to look for information, and obviously a lot of things have changed over the last 2 years with COVID, but I don't know if there's a way to get more of that information out as far as when some of those trains will be running, just so people that are in the area, tourists that are in the area, just are aware of what the options might be from Geneva to go, either east or west on particular days, depending on who's sponsoring what service, or the Rotary Club, or whether any of those are done on your own in the future, possibly. A certain weekend, a couple of weekends in July, or a couple of weekends in September, or something like that, where something is scheduled by you instead of the organization, or with the organization that gets more publicity.
Yeah, Gary, what we do on that is we put that on our website, which we are upgrading as well, given the fact that this year we're going to be expanding our excursion business. So hopefully people could get on the Finger Lakes website, and the trains will be identified that are being operated for the various organizations, along with the appropriate contact information, so that they can purchase their tickets. That's a work in progress.
Right. That was the only question I had, and I figured that was a work in progress. So,
and it gets complicated. Just even a credit card issue, it gets really it gets complicated for someone who doesn't understand technology. So that's something we're overcoming, and hiring the right people who do understand technology, so we can get those things in place.
Well, I operate a business, so it's just a small retail business, but the difference of what people know and don't know is just amazing. I mean, I've had employees that know everything about Apple Pay, and then I'll hire somebody and the customer says something about Apple Pay and they don't even know what it is. So, I mean, even among the young people, the knowledge as far as technology goes is all over the map, just depending on how they've been brought up and what they've been exposed to. So that's true of not only young people, but also older people that are not teenagers or in their 20s.
If I could just make one last pitch, Luke mentioned how difficult it has been for Amtrak to hire people. And I would say that I would second what he's talking about. And currently we have 5 positions that are open. So anybody who's listening in that might want a railroad career, I would encourage them to send us a resume, and we'd certainly entertain their hiring. We need enginemen, we need maintenance of way people, we need maintenance of equipment people, just like Luke does. And they're tough to find, and it's been a real challenge. And we pay well. Good benefits.
There you go.
Send in some information. We'll hire
Hey.
you.
Okay, anything else from the Q&A, Bruce? I wasn't really looking at the Q&A.
No, I think that we
That was
covered that. Again, support for potential service to the state fair, which if certainly, Mike, that's not a snap decision, but that would certainly be support. It would be good. And I know certainly we as ESPA would be happy to support, and we'll obviously write something that we had this as part of the presentation and support your going forward. So it is all good.
Thank you. We have
doubt.
a test run of the Bud car today, and we have fair people on the train as part of the planning and discussion in terms of setting up that shuttle.
No, that's great. Yep. As you may know, I may remember as an old New York Central boy myself, rode many Bud cars in various services, and there's nothing like that initial shudder when the transmission engages on a Bud car. There's no other piece of equipment like that in railroading, in my mind. So,
that's right.
That's
a good memory.
It is a lot of good memories. I'm glad to see it coming back to upstate New York. So that's a great thing.
It's funny. It's old technology, but it's very appropriate for today's market, it would seem.
Okay, thanks a lot, Mike, and
thank you.
Thank you very much for your time and your information on what's going on in the Finger Lakes Railroad, as well as the opportunities of maybe a connection up in Maine also. So. Okay, do we have, let's see, Bob on, even though we're a couple of minutes ahead. Is Bob on?
Bob is on. I just asked him. Here's Bob now live. We see Bob.
Okay, hello, Bob. Welcome to the ESPA annual meeting. I don't personally know you, but I have been on the Adirondack Railroad and have met some of the operating crews up there over the over more than 2 years ago. I haven't been up there since COVID started, obviously, but I don't know whether Bruce has any other intro. I think Bruce knows Bob a little better than I do, so Bruce can give a better intro there if you want.
I've known Bob for 3 days now. That's true. So long time relationship. I can say that, again, my relationship with the Adirondack goes back to my father, who retired from Conrail in 1982 and was instrumental in doing a number of things to save the potential for the Adirondack. I will, as an introduction, Bob Hest is current secretary of the Adirondack Railroad Preservation Society. I hope I have that correct, Bob. And we're very pleased to have him with us. And Bob is from Mountain View, New York, way up in the Adirondacks near Malone. So that's where we're hearing it. Did you get snow up there today, Bob?
It's snowing pretty heavy, Bruce. We're we had lost almost everything, and before the end of next week we'll have lost it all again.
Yep.
Thank you for having us today. It's an important event as far as the ARPS is concerned. I bring greetings from the members of the ARPS board, and in particular our president, Frank Kobliski. He regrets not being able to be here today. He's had a long planned family event that just he couldn't change and shuffle around. And when Luke Irvin, who's also on our board, suggested that it would be a great opportunity, Frank said, would you please do this? So in the next few minutes, I will share what in this 30th anniversary year for ARPS is from our first revenue run of the Adirondack Railroad from Thandera to Minnehaha back in 1992. A short look back and where we're going. For all of you who went through the pandemic. We did too. And here's kind of a picture of what happened to our operations during 2020. We didn't really sit on our laurels. A little bit was discussed by Jane and Luke earlier. We, as you will see during the rest of my presentation, we took a lot of steps to get ready to come back. You'll see the growth of an operation that a service offering rail bikes. It is no exaggeration when I tell you that rail bikes, we wouldn't be here without them, and the financial support from our banker during 20 and 21. So where are we now? We're on the move. This is the newest locomotive on the left. It's an MLW M420 that we acquired courtesy of hundreds of donations during 21. It's in great shape, and it's already in revenue service. Just prior to the pandemic constraints, we took delivery of a couple of new pieces of rolling stock, new to us. One of them is a dining car that was donated by Amtrak. It once operated on the New York Central Adirondack division, so it's kind of come home. And the dome car that you see was built for Union Pacific. Those two pieces of rolling stock that are, when they're coupled with a couple of Norfolk Southern cars that we purchased at their auction in 2018, has changed our service offering significantly, and it's being welcomed by new and old customers. We started winter services. In January, we ran our first, what we call cabin fever service. It is selling out. It's astounding. People were obviously really eager to get out from underneath the constraints of the pandemic. We ran a couple of Valentine's Day dinner trains that featured a 5-course dinner. And you see on the lower left is the inside of the dome car that at the lower level in the lounge. And we sold that, the 5-course meal sold out for both trips. The word of mouth is bringing passengers from places near and far. Our business partner began a long needed upgrade to the property from Snow Junction to Tupper Lake, which is the new northern terminus. We think when it's completed to Class 3 at the end of this year, it will be the longest passenger excursion railroad east of the Mississippi. The Tupper Lake community has been getting ready for the return of passenger rail for the past 15 years. A replica of the former depot was completed in 2007. 2022 is an anniversary year in that community. On July 16 in 1892, the first passenger train operated by the Mohawk and Malone arrived from Malone. We hope to be able to bring our first train into Tupper Lake in July to celebrate both of the anniversaries that the Adirondack is going through. People were talking about shop buildings, and this is our new shop building. It will make a big difference for our mechanical staff and volunteers who for the past many years have performed maintenance in the great outdoors. The building was completed late in 21, and in the coming year, we'll be installing equipment and stores. Another service offering by ARP started in 2018. Popular demand over the years has expanded the number of bikes we operate in Thandera. And this year, we will be offering for the first time that service in Tupper Lake. This is one of our first-class cars. It's one of the Norfolk Southern cars that we purchased. It has been refurbished with new seats and Amtrak standard tables, and has become very popular with our passengers. We're expanding our customer base, and I was listening to Mike Smith talk about what his new rolling stock, the Bud car, it's a smart move. We're expanding our customer base. The new equipment and offerings, service offerings, allows us to reach new territories, and we have a much more focused marketing effort than in the past. We've created a partnership with Oneida County Tourism, and it's making possible connections with I Love New York. And the Adirondack Railroad is now included in the broader marketing and promotion efforts by Oneida County. Similar efforts have begun with Franklin County at the north end of the railway. The success that ARPS, and I think all of us who are in this passenger excursion business like ARPS and ADIX, our success is made possible by dedicated staff and volunteers. So whether they're mucking out plugged culverts or the young actors that make our Polar Express such a memorable event, our staff and hours of service volunteers are essential to continuing success. The entire team at ARPS is really excited about our future. We welcome and invite you to enjoy what we are becoming. Thank you again for having invited us to be a part of your meeting today. Before taking questions, I want to mention a word of appreciation for an ESPA representative, Mike McNulty, who back in the day in the North Country, the Adirondacks, worked with me and a lot of other community members to work with an outfit called Trails and Rails Action Committee. We were about 35 people from the Tri-Lakes communities that worked really hard to prevent the rails being ripped up. Mike was a really stalwart and always brought back support from ESPA to the meetings that we had around the community. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. If you could unshare your screen.
I'm about to try to do that.
Yes, thanks, Bob. I worked with Mike quite often. As a matter of fact, I personally was up in both Utica and in Old Forge separate times to testify at the hearings in order to promote the support of keeping the tracks there as to allow for the further options of rail in those corridors, in that corridor in the future. So I'm quite familiar with Mike's passion for that, and joined him at, like I say, hearings both in Old Forge and in Utica during the 2 segments of times that they went through those hearings. So, but the good thing is, which some have pointed out, is I'm not sure we would have had things renovated up to Tupper Lake like is being done if that, I guess you would call it the grand compromise, did not happen. If nothing had happened, then probably nothing would have been improved and nothing would have been taken away. So I guess you can look at it from either angle as far as how things ended up or are ending up, at least as we look at things now. So
just to show that board members do work, I am showing there, that's Luke Irvine last October at Thundera. He does get around.
I was just going to say, he really gets around. Sure that's not his twin brother or something?
Yeah, no.
I was pretty wet that day, Bruce.
Oh, I could show you some video of that day. That was a horrendously wet day at Thundera.
I was a petitioner in the Article 78 that we won in the Supreme Court. And of course, the governor at the time didn't like being beat in anything, so they just went ahead and changed the rules. I'm not sure I'd call it a grand compromise, Gary. And I really believe that the communities of Saranac Lake and Lake Placid are going to rue the day. I look at the climate change legislation that New York State has in place. Moving around by car in the North Country is going to become very difficult if you don't own an electric vehicle. Railroads would have gotten people back and forth from all the major communities as is growing. That's what happened. So what's happening with Amtrak.
Yep, it is very sad to see right of way taken up, whether it's the only right of way between two cities or even in areas where there was 3 tracks and now there's only 2 tracks. That obviously makes things much more difficult when either freight service rebounds a little bit, or as you stated, Amtrak wants to expand service. We've been in a habit for many decades, as most of us know, of reducing the capacity, which has occurred for a variety of reasons, reducing rail capacity throughout the entire country, which has not been a good thing, and at some point has certainly been overdone. And personally, I think way too much has been taken up, but I'm sure there's people, Wall Street analysts, that would disagree with that, but that's a different topic that we don't want to get into right now. But losing track is certainly not a good thing in the majority of the cases.
So some questions for you, Bob. I'll pose the first one. Certainly the Adirondack Railroad, its partnership with the Genesee Valley Transportation and the Mohawk, Adirondack, and Northern is critical. You have to get from Utica to Remsen to Snow Junction. We have seen that the state has awarded the Mohawk, Adirondack, and Northern Genesee Valley a substantial amount of money for rehabilitation work on that segment. I would assume that's going to benefit the Adirondack operation.
Well, it will. The bridge that's over the Mohawk is probably the most important of what they're doing. That needs work, and I think it's included in what the amounts that you just described, Bruce. We recently renewed our the track usage agreement that we have with GVT, or MANN, I should say, and have, I think, repaired what some may have described as a relationship that was tenuous. We've got a really good general manager these days, and he is a very smart and astute operator and just a likable guy. And I think that's gone a long way to helping that relationship.
That's great. We have a question from one of our attendees about your relationship with the state, which again, the society and the operation has been on a month-to-month contract basis since the day one existence. Is there any progress toward having a longer term relationship that would certainly benefit the Adirondack?
We'd love.
If you don't wish to comment, you can say no comment.
Oh, I'll comment because it's been out there for a long time. The 30-day relationship really is governed more by contracts. This kind of contract that New York State has with many organizations. We're aware that because of the investment that the state has made in upgrading its right-of-way and the planned upgrade of stations at Beaver River, Sabattis, and in Tupper, that there is a requirement under state statute to go out for a request for proposals for a new operator. I don't know when, none of us know yet when that RFP will be issued. I presume it won't be until they have finished doing all of the work. And while the right-of-way rail ties, ballast, rail alignment, and the rest surfacing will be complete by the end of the year. I'm not sure that all of the station upgrades will be finished until sometime in 23. The hope by everybody, I suspect around Northeast, is that whatever they issue will be for a much longer period of time, and we will be very interested in being a part of that.
Got it. Understand. Okay. Are there any other questions from out in the attendee land? Again, you can type your questions into the question and answer box. We will see them, and we'll be happy to pose them to Bob.
Just while we wait for that, Bob, I guess, is the plan for the summer, fall, going into early winter to have the service offerings back to how it was prior to COVID, or is that going to be a slow process as you kind of need to not get too much supply of service out there without knowing what the demand is from customers? I guess, how is kind of your approach to that heading for the rest of the year, especially into the busy early winter season with the fall excursions, and then of course the Polar Express, which attract a lot of people, which obviously did not work very well in 2020. So,
Well, there was a disaster in 2020.
right. So how is that going forward for 2022, or how's your outlook on that?
21, we had a really successful Polar. We sold out, I think, all but one of the early trains just after Thanksgiving. All of the rest were sold out. We have I guess we've done the analysis of all of the trains that we offer, Gary, and the ones that are most popular, we will be putting on sale, I think, probably by the end of next week. We've had many telephone requests. When will you be putting tickets on sale across the entire season? So we're hopeful that the level of service, quality of service that people experienced and shared word of mouth will continue in 22. The new equipment is really starting to be talked about around not just our traditional market, but we're seeing inquiries come from much farther afield than has been our past experience. People like riding the Dome, and having been a part of a railroad family all of my life, there are many people in the railroad community across North America that like riding the first trains in the first season of a new piece of track. And the one between Thundera and Tupper Lake hasn't been open for a long time. It's a part of the Adirondacks you can't see from anywhere else.
These are pictures of mine that I took on the trip I was on back in October, just to show, again, it was a great day. We were up in the Dome. It was wet day. Luke already talked about that, but the quality of the service, the friendliness of the onboard folks, many of whom I know already, but it was certainly a great. So folks, here were some more pictures, the lower section of the Dome car. So for all the attendees on the call.
We've changed out that seating. You saw with the dinner service in one of my slides, Bruce. Mm-hmm. Those are really good pictures. Would you send them to me?
Be happy to, sure. I'm not a professional photographer, but they did come out pretty good.
They sure did. Thank you.
Especially considering the outdoor weather.
This was more representative of what it was like outside that day, I can assure you.
Not the ideal day for viewing the fall foliage, but
and that menu from the New York Central was not being offered that day. But
thank you, Bruce. I really look forward to your picks.
Yeah.
Bruce, was there anything else in the?
There's a question about has the Adirondack done any economic impact studies or statements about their operations?
Great question. Yes, we have.
Okay. And so the second part is, where can we find them? From the question.
They are not public. That would be really great for anybody who would love to see or to join in on an application for the operating permit, Bruce. Well, we're not sharing.
Okay, yep, no, which that makes sense, obviously. Could you talk a little about maybe a little bit about the society itself? And again, while the railroad is the operation, the Preservation Society, which was formed not quite 30 years ago after the Utica chapter started the operation, obviously are always looking for donations and volunteers. Maybe talk about some opportunities there if folks would be interested.
We're always looking for volunteers. There's the main operation of the railroad of the Historic Preservation Society over the last 5 or 6 years has really been railroad focused, and the expansion of alternate uses for the rail, one of which is rail bikes. We received within the last 6 months a really large collection of New York Central memorabilia materials, both print and in artifacts that were part of the New York Central's Adirondack division. The donor has granted all of this to us. He lives in California, and I'm still not sure how he acquired all of it, but it's a really substantial collection. And we are working with the Oneida County History Museum to stand up a display. We would loan to them materials for a permanent display at the museum.
The Oneida County Museum.
Correct.
Yep. Know that well. I grew up 2 blocks from there, so on Genesee Street. So know it very well. Okay. And one other question that's come in. What are connections from you like at Utica with Amtrak? And I know this is a topic that's dear to Luke's interest. So if Luke, you want to chime in.
Luke has certainly suggested that that the Adirondack set its schedule so that we might capture people walking across the platform, literally walking across the platform to get on Adirondack rail trains. We've looked at it in the past. There's concern we cannot become a 238 operator.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some people who say that if Amtrak were to offer some kind of ticketing that connected directly to us, that we might inadvertently slide into that situation, and that we're not an organization that could afford to become a 238.
Could you just for the folks on the attendees who might not know what you're referring to, I do, but could you just define that better? 238.
As I understand 238, it is you become a regular scheduled railroad, and there are all kinds of you get regulated by the STB and FRA as a scheduled passenger railroad. I'm reasonably certain New York NISTOT not terribly interested in having that happen, and we aren't either. There's an awful lot of liability insurance issues that arise.
Yes, I mean it's a multifaceted. I'm certainly not an expert on it either, but it is the definition between a tourist-oriented railroad operation and a regular commercially operated railroad operation, which Amtrak certainly is. And such. Mike is shaking his head up there in the very small square. Mike knows about that too, I'm sure. So and that's often the question that we get. Why isn't there through ticketing and such? So I think that's a good topic that's been brought up today, so that people do understand the challenges that exist there. And the person who asked the question just wrote in, got it, thanks. So that was a good question and answered. All good.
Glad to be able to help.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, Gary, anything else?
No, I don't think there's anything else. Thanks a lot for your time, Bob, and thanks for all of our speakers so far.